I'm sorry.
So, good morning, everyone. Well, I will speak in English. I presume that's the lingua franca also here at the Graduate Faculty of Economics of UNAM. So, welcome to today's seminar. Well, this is another edition of the CETRIDES seminar, which is led by our colleague, Professor Dr. Sara Ochoa León. And today it's a great occasion as we have an international colleague that is going to present a set of papers, the results of various papers that he has published. So, Professor Binitha Thampi, most welcome to Mexico, and thank you for accepting to deliver this talk in our seminar. And then I will give a brief information about Binitha's career. She's a professor of development studies in the humanities and social sciences at IIT Madras, India. Her work takes an intersectional approach looking at issues such as gender, poverty, labor, mobility, technology, and governance. Along with her academic work, she holds several research and advisory positions. She is currently an advanced researcher at the Spatial Methods in Urban Sustainability Center at the Technical University of Berlin in Germany. She's also a member of the NITI Aayog, the Government of India, Expert Committee on Social Justice and Empowerment, and serves as a visiting senior fellow honorary at IMPRI in New Delhi, India. In addition, she's a visiting professor and governing body member at the Public Policy Research Institute in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. Her research has been published in various international journals, and she regularly writes in Malayalam magazines on social and political issues. Over the years, she has been engaged with feminist activism in South India, and her teaching and research connect academic work, activism, and policy making. Professor Binitha Thampi is here at UNAM on a sabbatical period, working on her research, and today she's going to share with us some of the results of her work. She titled her presentation, Women Workers and the Politics of Precarity, a Study of 3 Contemporary Labor Protests. So I think Professor Binitha will have 40 minutes to present, 45 minutes to present her talk, and then we will have a comment by Professor Alicia Girón González. She's our colleague from the Institute for Economics of UNAM. So she will be the discussant of the paper, and well, she's a colleague, we know her. So she holds a PhD on Latin American Studies from the Faculty of Social Sciences and Social and Political Sciences of UNAM. She also holds a degree in economics from the School of Economics of UNAM, and she is emeritus researcher at the Institute for Economic Research, and belongs to the Sistema Nacional de Investigadores. She also coordinates a very important program on Asia and Africa at UNAM since 2017, and she also belongs to the Patronato of the Universidad Autónoma since 2015. She also participates in the Alto Panel para el Empoderamiento Económico de las Naciones Unidas a partir de 2016. So she's got a long curriculum, and Alicia has published so many things. I always enjoy what she publishes. So she will be the discussant for today's presentation. So Professor Binitha, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And at the outset, let me thank Professor Sarah Ujawa for organizing this seminar, and Professor Perotini for chairing, and more importantly, Professor Alicia Girón for commenting on the paper. And also, many thanks to the Department of Economics for hosting me, and the head of the department specifically. Thank you all for coming. Today, my attempt is to talk about 3 labor protests in a state in India and raise the question, what do they tell us collectively? What are the specificities of it, and what do they tell us collectively? I'll focus more on the first 2 protests due to paucity of time. I start with a map of India for you to get a sense of the place. So that's the map of India, and you see the Kerala southwestern state. So in India, despite economic growth in the past few decades, women continue to face major barriers to employment due to persistent gender norms and structural labor market constraints. And as a result, India has one of the lowest female labor force participation rate globally. About 1/3 of working age women are employed, according to recent data, national data. Kerala reflects a similar pattern despite its strong social development indicators. And India's growth, often described as jobless growth, which has disproportionately pushed women into low-paid and insecure work. Jobless growth meaning, along with growth, proportionate employment generation hasn't happened. When it comes to the state of Kerala, around 70% of working women are employed in the informal sector, whereas in India, it's around 90%. And in the informal sector, wages are low, legal protection and social security benefits are very limited. So the expansion of welfare programs in the past few decades, if you look at in India, has increasingly relied on women as scheme-based voluntary workers, allowing the state to deliver services while avoiding formal labor obligations. In response to this, women workers women workers in several sectors have begun to mobilize collectively to challenge exploitative labor regime and demand recognition of their labor rights. So this particular presentation examines women's labor precarity and collective mobilization in Kerala through 3 labor protests. One is called Women United Mobilization, Pombalai Urmai in the regional language, of tea plantation workers, women workers, took place in 2015. And the second is the nurses' agitation in the private hospitals from 2011 onwards. It's an unresolved issue. And the ASHA is basically community health workers under India's National Health Mission, their strike in 2025. So the first protest in plantation, if you look at the protest by women in the plantation for 9 days, so in the plantation, 9 days of labor protest completely disrupt the whole production process. It was in 2015, and there were around 6,000 women took part in the protest. They left their established trade unions and came up with a new collective called Women United Pombalai Urumai, and they registered as a separate trade union of women. To give you a sense of the tea industry, few figures. India is world's second largest tea producer. Total annual output 1.4 billion kg, which is 20 to 25% of total world production, and 80% of the total production is for domestic consumption, and India's exports 10% of the total global tea exports, valued approximately 1 trillion Indian currency, which is around 10.8 billion US dollars. It's a significant contributor to the agricultural sector, and in agriculture sector's contribution to total GDP is between 14 to 16% in India. Hence, direct share in India's GDP is small, less than 1%. 2 to 3 million people directly and indirectly employed, with women comprising of around 60 to 70% of the workforce. This is the map of Kerala. You see Munnar there on the right side, and Kerala is sharing border with the neighboring state Tamil Nadu on the right side, if you look at. Couple of pictures for you to get a sense of the place. And it's a very important tourist destination. I'm not promoting tourism here. These are women working. These are the labor lines. This is where they reside. Protest, few pictures. They're meeting the opposition leader, the protesters, the chief minister and the labor minister, the then chief minister and labor minister. And finally, the government successfully mediated, and the protest ended. The protesters received popular support and wider media attention. Even BBC reported and made a story. And the dominant narrative was poor, marginalized castes, women from marginalized castes and their migrant women organized for their rights and up against their trade unions, established trade unions. And the immediate provocation for the protest was management reduced annual bonus from 20% to 10%, citing the reason of decline in profits. After the strike, management agreed to pay 8.33% as bonus and 11.77 as ex gratia, meaning one-time payment. And also, Plantation Labor Committee increased minimum wages from around $2.6 to $3.5, even though the workers demanded $5.6. But along with that minimal wage hike, they also increased the plucking quantity from 21 kgs to 25 kgs. And if you look at the history briefly of this plantation, 1877, Britishers decided to convert forest land to tea plantations. A Scottish planter got the lands for lease from the local chief of the princely state. There are 24 estates in that location. Munnar is the name of the place. They are migrant workers from the neighboring state, Tamil Nadu, and they started moving from 1880s onwards. All of them, 90% of the workers are these migrant workers from Tamil Nadu, and around 10% are from Kerala. Abolition of slavery at that point made available the flow of workers. And initially it was 9 months contract. By 1920, it became more or less permanent and labor lines were built. And one unit, one dwelling is around 200 square feet. It's just one room. In 1964, Tata, the Indian multinational company, became a partner in the tea production of this Scottish company. But eventually, the transfer of ownership to Tata took place in 70s, and it was completed in 1983 because of India's Foreign Exchange Regulation Act of that time. In order to ensure workers in an estate, inter-estate mobility was restricted by the Britishers, and Tata continued this policy. New workers can register only if they get married into the estate. Many women came from Tamil Nadu through marriage. And Tamil workers, they continued to retain their ties with families back home and had annual visits for their festivals. Point here is very little assimilation into Kerala culture and society. Division of labor was such that around 70% of women and the rest male workers, women in plucking and men in plucking the leaves, and men in pruning, spraying pesticides, factory work, etc. The wage for women is such that minimum 25 kg they have to pluck, above which there is an incentive. Around 100 kgs they pluck on a regular day. Estate provide creche facility for under 5 children, and there is a primary school 1st to 4th grade in regional language, Tamil language, not the Kerala's language. And children are sent to, after the primary school, children are sent to relatives' homes or private boarding schools in nearby towns in Tamil Nadu. This is about the change in the institutional structure. Early 2000s, if you look at, there was this global crisis in the tea industry. There was profit loss in 4 consecutive years for Tata Tea, and they decided to withdraw from production and started concentrating in brand building. And employee buyout model was mooted and accepted by its board of governors. As a result, Kanan Devan Hill's private limited company was born in 2005 and workers owned company. Tata's, on the other hand, came up with Tata Global Beverages Limited and a big business, multinational business. So workers are shareholders in this company. They 70% of the company's equity capital owned by them, and Tata retained around 80% of the stakes. Tata buys tea from this newly formed company in an auction at a cheaper price, as they are the only bulk buyers. Annual production currently is around 24 to 25 million kilograms. Trade unions, if you look at, several trade unions, AITUC, CITU, INTUC, these are the major trade unions with bulk of the membership with the Communist Party's trade union, AITUC. They started working from 1950s, and their presence is very visible in the everyday lives of the workers. They involve in allotting work, arbitrate disputes between workers and between workers and the management, and they represent workers' interests in the forums that management provides, as well as in the plantation labor committee. So they're very important in the everyday lives of the workers. The questions here are, what underlying structural conditions beyond immediate triggers led to the unrest and uprising in Munnar, and what political meaning did the protest carry in terms of women workers' demands for rights and dignity, and how gender, labor, and shifting spatial dynamics combine to create restrictive conditions for women, and what does this reveal about the nature of citizenship rights available to women in Munnar estates. In order to understand, address these questions, a couple of themes we need to look at: the land question, spatial specificities of women's labor, tourism, because Munnar has emerged as a major tourist destination in the past few decades, if you look at. And also, they're all from migrant workers from Tamil Nadu. Changes in Tamil Nadu also affect their lives and life decisions. And neoliberal crisis management in the new company. Briefly, each of them, if you have questions and queries, I'm pretty sure I'm talking about a particular context in Kerala. You may have queries. You can ask all of them later. Men complete their estate work in the forenoon and they go to Munnar town for work. Also avail leave and take early retirement. They do loading, unloading, construction, driving. Lots of work available for them. Whereas women had limited opportunities. They also need to retain their housing. In order to retain it, they should work in the estates. And also the inequality in facilities such as roads, shops, consumer goods, movie theater, etc. between the estates and the town was growing exponentially. More importantly, the wage gap between men and women was also widening as a result. This is a picture of the Munnar town. It's very crowded. The land question, it's basically lease land for Tata from the government of Kerala, and they solely control the location. They provide infrastructure, including roads, electricity, fuel. They own the petrol pumps. And Tata owns a significant chunk of shops and other buildings in the town. They collect the rent. Several illegal occupations in the past few decades as a result of tourism industry and lack of available lands, because it's estate and then the town. Multiple claims by migrants from other parts of Kerala, shop owners, illegal constructions of hotels and resorts, dispute over land owned by Tata, and the government owned forest land. Government did several rounds of resurveys, but Tatas are very powerful. It's hard to challenge and get back the lands from them. It's an unresolved issue. The new company, the private limited company that came in, workers owned, got a 30-year sublease from Tata, the lands, and they bought physical assets in the land. Physical assets meaning primarily the factory and the housing. This is a board there. Private road, no entry, trespassers will be prosecuted because they control the location. And the kind of socioeconomic changes in Tamil Nadu, if you look at caste relations and hierarchies, have become more relaxed. It hasn't gone anywhere, but relaxed. Women from young generation do not want to work in their states, rather look for services sector employment in the Munnar town or Tamil Nadu or elsewhere. And Munnar town provides opportunities because of the tourism industry, whereas accommodation is an issue. It's very expensive. Even for me, it was expensive when I did the field work. So to get a state house, one has to work with the company and should stay with the parents or relatives in that 200 square feet sized house. Poverty has reduced in Tamil Nadu in the past 2 decades, if you look at significantly. And also industries moved to rural areas as land prices increased in the cities, and transportation as a result improved. better development in terms of infrastructure and other business establishments. Whereas, unfortunately, Munnar estates remained without much changes. Transportation to Munnar town from the estate still very expensive. Men collect money and they travel together. It's expensive for women. As a result, women got tied to the land. Marriage into estates became unattractive as new opportunities came up in Tamil Nadu, as I explained. That resulted in weakening of kinship ties and produced tensions and anxieties in the community. The neoliberal participatory management that I'm very critical of, which I wrote in Malayalam regional language as well. Workers are shareholders, I told you, in the new company, but there is labor aristocracy. They hold majority of the shares. They are with the management, and they are not the Tamil workers. They are mostly Malayalis from very prominent communities. So they have introduced participatory management structure, meaning workers' representative can participate in some of the committees, but decisions are made by the majority shareholders. They also introduced mechanization, scissor cutting, but there is high reject. Maybe they are cutting 100 kg, but the supervisor is telling it's reject and you only have 40 kg. They didn't know, women did not know how to deal it. Interestingly, from the laws, I said 2000, early 2000s, when the company started in 2005, they had huge loss. They recovered from the loss in a couple of years. And the data shows that it's primarily because of the exploitative anti-labor strategies they used. So story basically is that workers-owned company became more exploitative and anti-labor. So the point basically here hence is blind approach towards this participatory management structure is not telling anything. It's basically, it is anti-labor. These are a couple of slogans. I'm not going into it. On the whole, it shows socialist feminist politics. On the one hand, exposing the exploitative nature of the production system, and on the other hand, making claims for better wages and entitlements. They also later made claim over the land as well. And more importantly, there is an absence of state there. No government schools or government hospitals with better facilities. Tata provided everything. The township completely owned by them. As a result, there is denial of citizenship, ethnicity, language, work, geography, all contributed in it. Aftermath of the protest success, they could not survive for a year. Management and trade unions worked together to dismantle it. Leaders moved to different political parties and trade unions. Currently, the daily wage is around $4, an average monthly income between $80 to $100. That's it. Let's move on to, so far, it's a story of women in the plantation sector, organized sector. This is nurses' protest in private hospitals in Kerala. 2011 onwards, protests and agitations erupted in various hospitals. Suicide of a nurse from Kerala in Mumbai, another state, Maharashtra, generated wider discussion among nurses and about exploitative labor conditions, etc. And then protests started in several private hospitals in Kerala. They demanded for higher wages and better working conditions. Union came up, United Nurses Association, Indian Nurses Association, wider sympathy from civil society and support. But Indian Medical Association and Association of Doctors was insisting on state declaring Essential Services Maintenance Act. Once the state declares ESMA, Essential Services Maintenance Act, you cannot protest. You have to work. If you continue working, you lose your jobs. Government did not do that, but and government recommended implementation of Minimum Wages Act passed by the Kerala Legislative Assembly in 2009, but in vain, they did not implement. Government also appointed 2 committees, and these committees recommended new wage, better wage structure and improved working conditions, not implemented again. The career, if you look at, the nursing career has specificities. If you look at, started colonial period, there were Christian missionary hospitals and later on government hospitals. First nursing school in 1855, and there's a long history of labor migration of nurses to Europe, US and Middle Eastern countries. And interestingly, this promise of mobility acted against collectivization and unionization, whereas almost every other sector of workers in Kerala got unionized. Healthcare sector in Kerala, if you look at, Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate, talked about Kerala model of development with better social sector outcomes despite low per capita income, and the higher investments in health sector by successive state governments, if you look at. So there are private healthcare institutions, non-profit charity institutions, because the missionaries set them up, for-profit caste community managed healthcare institutions, and doctor entrepreneur institutions. These are the kinds of institutions we had. And in Kerala, 60 to 65% of inpatient care provided by these private hospitals. And there is crisis in 80s, financial, and there is a decline in state investments. And also, because of the labor migration, remittances significantly went down to Kerala, and the expectation, people's general expectation of quality care also changed. They wanted better care in private hospitals. So 90s, if you look at, transition in terms of scaling up of private healthcare institutions. 90s, 2000s, emergence of new generation of private healthcare institutions. And the very notion of care has been reconstituted in and through that. And institutional practices have been modernized, standardized ISO standards came in, better infrastructure, technology-intensive procedures, etc. And they also, more importantly, introduced a managerial class between doctors and nurses. They are the PROs, and they provide a kind of service. They come more than once a day, visit the patients and ask about their well-being, complaints, so on and so forth. And the brand building, I read in an article that around 15 to 20% of the revenue of these new generation hospitals are spent on advertisements. And there is competition between Indian and foreign capital invested institutions. Private equity backed investments came in recently, Blackstone, KKR, etc. So, and as a result, crisis in the relatively smaller hospitals in smaller towns. So understanding, and interestingly, if you look at the fact that there is this Baumol's coast disease, which talks about even when the labor productivity is not increasing in certain occupation sectors, the wage will go up. Interestingly, and we have seen that in history, but nurses' wages, in fact, declined even in bigger hospitals because there is this wide wage disparity in sharing the total wage bill with a few highly paid doctors, middle level new managerial class, and low paid nurses. And as I said, the notion of care got reconstituted on both accounts. For receiver, it's the amount of time, attention, responsiveness from the care providers. And for the providers, the role of nurses, doctors, and the new managerial class, everything was standardized. In order to manage the crisis, many hospitals started nursing schools and engaged in varied unethical labor practices because they are providing, it's their training and they are providing free labor and training forever. Also, there is this decline simultaneously in the global demand for nurses. And also decline in other cities as a result of several nursing schools opened in the neighboring states. There is this increased resentment and as a result protest due to constrained labor mobility. And mushrooming of nursing schools, if you look at during 2000s-2010 period in neighboring states and in Kerala. And no enough students in the schools opened by smaller hospitals because their degree is general nursing and midwifery course, which was de-recognized by the OECD countries. And certificate of bigger hospitals with a brand name has value that prompted nursing students to hold on to exploitative conditions and low wages. And the training has been packaged differently with varied components of experience, meaning they will work forever in operation theater and different departments. It's free labor, including hospital management. And various categories of nurses as a result with highly differentiated wage structure. Intention is fragmentation of labor. Relatively bigger hospitals are taking advantage of the medical tourism and variety of incentives through, even though the wages are very low. And the protest, if you look at male nurses, largely involved, and particularly in the new association's leadership, and they even recommended 20% reservation for men in government hospitals. This is a highly feminine job, nursing care. So they're actually, after the protest, seen as a disruptive force. And interestingly, an unanticipated consequence of men's entry into predominantly feminized occupation was effeminization. They were asked to behave like women, which is very hard for men. Also, their recruitment declined during that time significantly, and they started looking for other jobs like medical representatives, so on and so forth. And the protest is continuing in the sense that it's not very active at the moment, but it's an unresolved issue. And the role of the state, if you look at very limited regulation of private healthcare sector, and it's significant challenges to the public healthcare because loss of public trust. These people are spending a lot of money on advertisement and the great doctors they're having, so on and so forth. So this is basically a symptom of a crisis in the healthcare sector. Pandemic moment exposed further the value of care work and the crisis in the healthcare sector. Court, for instance, the court had to intervene with a guideline for the prices of services provided. The last protest is ASHA workers. They are the voluntary care workers. In India, India has the federal system, and India's federal system, health is a state subject. So there are union subjects state subjects, and there is the concurrent list in which both states and the union are responsible. Health primarily a state subject. So the ASHA's Accredited Social Health Activist program was launched in 2005 as part of the National Health Mission, a centrally sponsored initiative aimed at strengthening primary healthcare services across India. They are scheme-based workers receiving honorarium, not recognized as workers with wages and entitlements. They get the services they provide, each of the services, immunization, antenatal care, there is a specific amount. Additionally, the state government and the union government are giving fixed honorariums. So a new organization came up and they protested in the state capital from February to October 2025, such a long period. They demanded monthly fixed honorarium provided by the state government from $80 currently. So recently they raised to $230. As they belong to, their claim basically was that they belong to a specific category of care work due to the kind of services rendered during the pandemic, unlike similar categories of care workers. And they could build emotional bond with urban middle class and garnered their support for the protest. The popular sentiments was with them, which is not the case when other care workers, similar care workers, protest. And the state, if you look at, organized and kept similar categories of care workers, state-supported self-help collective of women, sanitation workers, Anganwadi, meaning preschool children they take care of, Anganwadi workers. So similar categories of several care workers. Hence, state did not yield to the claims as majority workers were not with the protest, with the union of the ruling government. And there are several similar categories on ground. If you are giving one group, you have to give to everybody. They marginally raised for everybody after the protest. I would argue that ineffective mobilization strategy of protesters, because you cannot win a protest with the popular support of the middle class. Rather, broad-based solidarity building of care workers is needed. So in terms of conclusion, despite from different sectors, these struggles share common issues related to gendered labor hierarchies, institutional restructuring, and demands for dignity and recognition. Women's labor across these sectors have been systematically undervalued, even though it's essential for both economic production and social reproduction. Plantation, I explained each case. So this case also revealed changes in the relationship between labor movements and the state in Kerala. Although Kerala has a history of strong trade unions and progressive labor policies, current struggles show the limits of state intervention under the new liberal economic restructuring. In plantation and private healthcare, corporate influence restricts state regulation. In scheme-based employment like ASHA work, the state itself creates precarious labor arrangements. Women workers are increasingly challenging this, but the results are not very high if you look at. But it is a kind of promising mobilizations, each of them. The struggle emphasized the need for solidarity among informal women workers across sectors. They also stressed the importance of recognizing care work. Addressing these challenges requires not only better wages and working conditions, but also broader changes in how labor, care, and gender are understood in policy and in institutional practices. Thank you all for your patient listening, and I welcome your comments and questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Binitha, for this enlightening presentation that gave us a lot of information on the women's labor conditions in India, specifically focused on the case of Kerala. So, in a way, I was taken aback listening to the analysis and, in particular, the data you mentioned regarding these rather, strict women labor conditions in Kerala, because I've been familiar with social policies and economic policies in Kerala that gave me some sense as to the advancements of Kerala with regards not only India itself as a country, but also internationally. I remember reading papers, in particular Amartya Sen, as you mentioned, stating that when it comes to some social indicators of economic and social development, Kerala compares very well with highly developed countries. So, and now the situation seems very unstable in many respects. So thank you very much. I think there will be questions. I forgot to mention that you will have an opportunity to raise some questions. So please feel free to raise your questions either in English or Spanish. We can help if you need translation. And the questions session will come after Professor Alicia Girón's comment. So please, Alicia, make your comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I would like, it was an opportunity for me to be here with Bina, and also thank you to Sara Ochoa, to Professor Sara Ochoa, to invite me for this seminar, and also to Professor Ignacio Perrotini. Well, I read the paper, and they had very interesting things of the three cases that Professor puts in their work. But I'm going to make some. I wrote the highlights of this in Spanish, so I'm going to use my Spanish English, and I hope you can understand. You may understand me. Well, first of all, is that in the first part you said one thing that it is very important, because when I was reading the three cases that you mentioned about Kerala and of the precarity of the social reproduction of women, I was just thinking that it is just the same as in Mexico, as in the underdeveloped countries, and also very interesting of what's going in India and some countries as South Africa and Nigeria. And because 3 weeks ago, we were talking about the policies of the central bank in South Africa and in Nigeria. And one of the, why do I relate this to Kerala state, is because they are countries that they are growing, but at the same time, precarity is very low. And another thing that it is very important, you said that 70% of the informal, 70% of the workers are informal. In Latin America is between, it depends of the country, but it is around 50% for all the countries. But the most important thing is that 30% of these 70% are women, but they are in the informal sector. And this is how precarity, it shows you the precarity of the policies, of the economic policies that has these countries. So, so most of them in the you said that the women assume the economy, the cost of the structural economy, and also is concentrated in the informal workers, and also care is part of the social reproduction, which is they don't have. You never recognize the value of this work. So as I said, it says here that in the labor, women labor reality is that 34% are informal, and 34% is the labor force of the 70% of the women informal. So maybe you can explain later this percentage, because I think this is very important. Because, for example, I don't have the data for Mexico, but I think they're very similar. No, the informal workers is very high, and the most important thing that was I was comparing with Nigeria and South Africa, that you don't have you pass from agriculture to the services, but you don't have the industrial. So it doesn't give you opportunities, not only for women and also for men, to have a better way of life and to have informal employment. So I think this is when you study this is one of the, let's say, ¿cómo se dice? Lo que destaca, the most important thing is this, that from you pass from the agriculture sector to the service sector, but without intensity in the industrial workforce. And of course, in the plantation, when you talk about the plantation, you see the work, that high intensive work that woman has in the plantation, and also the difference, the division of labor. Women are in the plantation, but men go to do other works that they are very intensified, and they are very, it is very, how to say, muy fatigada, muy
Stressed.
muy stressed as a work setting. And the other thing that the nurses, this is when you are talking about the corporative healthcare, I was thinking that maybe the investment of the state was a high investment in the care service. And the other thing that you said is that it is very related with the institutional investors. There's the it says Blackstone, but I think
Blackstone.
it's BlackRock.
BlackRock.
BlackRock is the one who are in charge of this investment in the healthcare, and also is a healthcare for the, I don't know, for the middle, for the high classes. And I was thinking that maybe most people or Indian diaspora that are working in the Emiratos or in the Arab world, or maybe that very high salaries, came to these hospitals. I don't know if that is true, but when I was reading, I think maybe this is a very wealth business. But the state invests in that one, then they came BlackRock, they make a better, they grow the investment. But the problem is that the woman they don't have better salaries, and so there is a gap of the high profits that these hospitals has, and also the doctors that are in the high level of the hospitals. So I think that is a very important thing in your work. And the other thing is, I think you will explain more about the AAHE, how this is like volunteer work. Many women work in this volunteer, especially for the care system, but at the same time, they pay very well. It is incredible what they pay, because they have reduced. And also, for example, other thing that you said, and it was there, how the people, when they, the salaries of the women in the plantation grow, they grow, but at the same time they say, okay, we're going to pay you more, a higher salary, but now you have to give more tea leaves, no more more kilos of the tea. So this is very interesting. This is a very, I don't know if neoliberal, this is draconian policy, no? It's how, okay, we're going to give a higher salary, but you are going to give us more tea leaves. And the other is the, how to say, no, I think it's, well, the care system, I think this is the United Nurses Association. This is the, it was, of course, I think this is, well, I don't know if you say that there's a crisis in the care system, but I don't know if you are referring to the salaries or you are referring to the national care system. Or only in this place, or this is an example of the care system. Well, I also said about the hierarchy in the care system, and this thing, the ASHA, the Kerala Asha Health Workers Association, this is very interesting because we used to have this, for example, in the rural areas, but it isn't, they aren't organized. Even a few months ago in the urban city in Mexico City, they are like the women that bring the babies, parteras, and they decided that not only they have to certify, but I think they prohibit to make that work. It was something, I don't know, but it was like a big
issue.
Yes, issue here, because they said, no, you have to, if they want to bring the babies, they not only they have to be certified, but you just can do it at home. So there's I didn't understand, but this is, so here in Mexico, of course, we have that system, many in the rural areas, even in the urban, and now it's like, let's say, many intellectuals are having the babies. They don't want to have them in the hospitals. It's like, I don't know, it's like a very, como una moda. It's like
It's a fashion, right?
It's a fashion, but very, like you
Hipster.
are vegetarian, or now you are vegan, and now I want to have the baby at home, something like that. That is, it's really very, for me, it's very difficult to understand. Well, and now you see how the state is in the state don't resolve anything. The state don't say anything about the exploitation and the precarity of women, and even in the nurses that are classified, that are having a very good profile. And so also is very interesting how the exportation of nurses to other countries, especially to the first. So you invest in this, in the development of the nurses, but at the same time, they are very high qualified, and they go to other countries. And that would be very interesting to which countries they go, to USA, to the Arab countries. But for example, in Japan, they have a problem with the care system. But for example, they don't, for example, there in Japan, the Philippines are the nurses that are caring the old people, but at the same time, the nurses has to learn very well Japanese, because in Japan there's a culture that they don't want the migration. So I don't know if in the nurses of the Indian nurses, where countries, where do they go? And then, well, I have all the, well, I think it would be better to hear you, but the line that cross all your work is that woman precarity, and it is very interesting, and how the state promotes this precarity of women to give more profits to BlackRock and to the private system and all that. Well, thank you very much. I learned a lot. It was very interesting. And thank you, even because I have a PhD student, a postdoc student in La Puea, and he has a map of India and say, where is Kerala? So I know Kerala now. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for inviting me, and Nacho also. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Alicia, for your comments. And now we come to the last part of the seminar, questions from you. If you have any question, you want to raise any question, please feel free to do so, either in English or Spanish, like I said. Here we can help, distorting your questions as we translate it. Okay, yes, please, Sarah.
I think
we like to thank Professor Thampi for accepting to deliver this talk, and also the Professor Alicia Girón for the comment. I would like to ask Professor Binitha about the situation of women at work in India generally, because he said that despite the economic growth, female participation in the labor force is low. So, I don't know if you can elaborate on that. Which are the reasons, from your point of view, from this low participation? I don't know if it is because of a more familiaristic, for example, welfare system that relies on family, on women, and also because of a high burden of unpaid work at home, domestic work, probably. So, what would be a general picture of the situation of women, working women in India? And also, as was said, Kerala is a case of study, development study. And I would like to ask you about the reflection of that. Do you think that there is a relationship on the fact that Kerala has been known for having high HIV indicators? Do you think that this favors probably the appearance of this mobilization? Because, I don't know, probably women are not aware of the rights, or it can be the opposite. If you have a decline in HIV indicators, probably that triggers also this process. I don't know, do you think there is a relationship with the fact that Kerala has a higher standard life probably than India in general? Thank you for
Any more questions? Yeah? Yes, Alejandro? Sí. Puedes hablar en castellano o en inglés, lo que quieras. ¿Mm?
So-called neoliberalism. I think that it's interesting because we have the over-exploitation of not only the women's work, also I think that you have the problem of the land and a little bit the problem of the debt. No, I think that the neoliberalism is creating this over-exploitation, especially when it has this narrative of workers without part of the state in these areas. I think that in Mexico we have similar cases, not only in rural zones, also here in Mexico City. I think that a great example is happening just now because we have closed the FIFA World Cup. There's a lot of work of the state focused only on the World Cup and ignoring the needs of the workers, needs of transportation, health, etc. But I think that things that makes me noise in my head when it's the use the termination, I think, because I think that it is happening also because the neoliberalism, and the way I was thinking about it is maybe a decrease in the profit rate. So I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. If the capital is not only over exploitation women, now we need to create more over exploitation beyond gender, ethnic, etc. So I would like to know your thought about this specific concept. Thank you.
Gracias, Alejandro. Any further question? ¿Alguna pregunta más? Yes.
Well, in your presentation, you show that women and workers are shaped not only by wages and working conditions, but also by mobility and social rights. How does this help us understand why some protests receive more public support than others?
So, Binitha, would you like to react to these questions, or you want me to collect more? I have some, but perhaps yeah, that's right. Okay, thank you. And I also have a question for Alicia. I also have a
Oh,
question
for me? Okay.
Question to the discussant.
Okay.
Thank you all for your comments and questions. I assume some of them are comments, and particularly my discussant, Professor Alicia Girón. Fabulous point, and I'm very honored to have you as my discussant. So the question basically, 34% of women, the latest survey shows that periodic labor force survey indicates that in Kerala, 34% of women are in the workforce. Of 34%, 70% are in the informal sector. In India, if you look at, around 90% are in the informal sector. So Kerala compared to all India is in a better position. More women are in the formal sector. But informality, the nature of informality, if you look at, there is no regular wage, no legal contract, no entitlements, so on and so forth. When I looked at the recent periodic labor force survey data last year, also found that among the informal sector workers, women from majority are from marginalized caste communities. So there is this, when you talk about India, whatever the topic, this caste dimension is very important because our society is hierarchically organized on the caste lines. So many of these, majority of the informal sector workers, if you look at, and the among the informal sector workers, the very low paid at the bottom jobs are occupied by these women. Plantation, I do agree, and I noticed your point that even though they made a marginal increase in the wages, they also changed the minimum plucking quantity from 21 to 25 kgs. Unfortunately, not many discussion on that particular point, but that's what happened. Also, I particularly looked at company was in loss when they got it, when they formed, but they recovered the losses in a couple of years. How they did that? This is one strategy. The other one, even I can't believe they are paying higher prices for the electricity, these workers, than other regular persons in the state like me. Because the Tata Tea buy bulk of electricity from Kerala Electricity Board and they are the one distributing it. They increase the electricity price from. So there are very many ways in which they manage the loss, but bulk of it shared by the poor workers. It's black rock. I'm sorry, I said black stone. Yeah.
They're very close. Stone and rock.
Yeah,
It's my
yeah.
friend.
It's rock. So the other point you said is an important point, I guess. High investments in healthcare by the state, yes, always. At the same time, around 65% of the healthcare provided by the private. But interestingly, past 10 years, the left government ruling, now next month elections, they have done a lot, again, improving. And pandemic time was a moment for people to realize, okay, you need to go to the public health institutions. But as you said, there are middle class remittance from other countries. They expect better care. So my point is that the whole idea of care has changed significantly. It's not about whether you are getting better and curing from your illness. It's all about, it's also aesthetically managed, the whole idea of care. I'm thinking through this idea aloud and I just want to write about it. So, and hence this has been there for a long time in Kerala, the private healthcare. Several studies came out. They're very prominent, providing support, but at the moment, it's a very decisive moment in healthcare in Kerala, I believe, because these private equity companies are bought 70-60% of the stakes in many of the private hospitals. More importantly, elections next month, the Congress government, the Congress party, in their election manifesto saying that they are going to give health insurance for everybody, 25 lakhs rupees, which is very high amount. So if you look at most of the illnesses, it comes around 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakhs maximum. Very few treatment, this amount. The question is, why do they do that? Why they came up with everybody will get this huge amount of insurance. So this is a new form of siphoning public money for private interests. Yeah. So I'm very suspicious of that. Many people are very happy, but I'm very suspicious of this. Everyone getting 25 lakhs Indian rupee as insurance. So I think, and also private healthcare sector in India, if you look at, going to change radically, not in a positive way, privatization, and the smaller players are going to get eliminated. That's what I believe. So you also asked about this community, ASHA workers, community health volunteers. There are similar several categories. So when the government came up with the welfare programs, several welfare programs, they don't want these, they want people to be on ground, make sure that it's happening, doing all kinds of support, but they are not regular employees deserving wages. So there is this history of treating women's work in India as it comes from the word seva, meaning service.
Meaning what?
Service.
Service.
It's a social service.
Okay.
So there is a long history, and hence, when you're doing a social service, you can't claim any wages or anything.
Like charity.
Charity.
It's like, okay.
So they are honorary workers. Women are good at providing these services, and they get some compensation, remuneration for their honorary work. Hence, if you look at the state organized self-help groups, and they do a lot of work on ground, and they get a minimum honorarium. And then the sanitation workers, they are the ones managing the waste in the state, and they also get similar little money, less than $100 monthly. So this is how a kind of, especially Kerala, the context is that Kerala went ahead with massive decentralization in late middle of 90s. As a result, decentralization meaning devolution of responsibilities, people, and money to the local governing institutions. So, in a sense, you have an overstretched state. They were successful in devolving responsibilities and money, but people, it was difficult because of the unionization and all that. You can transfer. Hence, they came up with all these women volunteers doing hell lot of work and not be compensated.
So the state is a solution for the state. But a very nice solution, very, the charity is nice.
Yes,
woman,
yes. So feminists have
voluntary.
been criticizing this for some time. And the crisis in the care sector, I said, you asked clarification. What did I mean? Crisis basically in terms of the kind of restructuring of the healthcare system. Smaller players found it very difficult to survive. Bigger ones, again, difficult in the sense that new managerial class came in, total wage bill had to be shared between them and the nurses. So they started as a solution, they started nursing schools with the hospital. And then these are training basically and unpaid. And they also came up with all illegal activities such as bond system. When you join as a student, there is this bond you execute, which means you will work there for without any payment. In some cases, you have to pay some little money for the training you get. And they were doing it because they could migrate to other countries. And you asked which other countries they go. United States, Europe, England, this was initially, but bulk of them, or if you look at, to Middle Eastern countries.
Yes.
Middle East. Bulk, Middle East. After the pandemic, interestingly, Government of Kerala signed contract with Germany, Italy for nurses because care homes, they realized after the pandemic, care homes needs several deaths in the care homes of elderly. So they need better support mechanisms there. So nurses are going. So that's the kind of crisis I said, and the crisis management was exploiting these students in the name of train. The home delivery that your comment, in Kerala data, if you look at, it's nearly 100%, 98, 99% institutional delivery. And our IMR is, Kerala's IMR, infant mortality rate, is 5, which is higher than the US. So very few people are going for this very fancy water birthing and all kinds of things that came up, but it's not a big thing in Kerala, fortunately. Institutional delivery, hospital deliveries are very high. In India also, I don't know, I need to look at more carefully. MMR, maternal mortality rate, has come down in the past 10-15 years rapidly, drastically. One has to look at why. I guess these are the kind of comments on the whole I got. If I missed anything, I'm sorry, you can remind me. Coming to Professor Sarah's question, women's work in India generally, low work participation rates, precisely because of India's various, first of all employment available for women are bad employment. There's no good employment available in the form, because 90% of the total workforce are in the informal sector. So good employment. India's challenge basically in that sense is to generate decent employment, good employment, whether you like the word decent or not, ILOs, but good employment. Low, and hence, Kerala, for instance, it's educated unemployment. It's around 47-50% are in the NEET category. NEET meaning not in education, not in employment. The educated unemployment is very high. Why? Because there is no good employment opportunities. Because 65-70% of the GDP, services sector contributes. So in services sector, you have good employment, tech, high-end tech services and all that, but that's very few. If you look at India, is a large country, mostly low-paid informal sector employment. The low work participation is also a reason of patriarchal, if you look at India's patriarchal structure, and the childcare responsibilities. We actually recent presentation, we also looked at the reasons for not in workforce women. Childcare, around 50% of women, taking care of children, elderly, family, and it's not changing across income quintiles. It's same for all women, interestingly. And lack of adequate transportation All India around 30% report that they don't have any jobs available in the nearby locality. The transportation is hard and the violence against women is very high. It's not safe for them to go and come back late in the evening, so on and so forth. So on the one hand, demand side issues, on the other hand, supply side issues, low work participation. And your second question, Kerala's high social sector development, progressive state, so on and so forth. Is it the reason for the mobilization? For women mobilization? What is the relationship between the two? Now, it's not that interestingly straightforward. Because Kerala's progressiveness, if you look at by and large, attributed to the left politics and now the left government for past 10 years and all that, they almost all categories of workers are unionized also. If you are with the union, it's easy for you to protest, but your union, you're not doing it on your own. Your union might take up your issue and protest. But if you're not with the union, all these protests are not with the left unions. They're outside of the left union. And hence, it's very difficult for them. It's very challenging. The last protest in 2025, the ASHA workers protest, the care workers, frontline care workers protest, there are around 26,145 workers in the state. The protesters were less than 1,000. Rest with the left union. It's very hard for them. Hence, progressive politics is not directly responsible for these responses. It comes from their own precarity and their maybe the reason for fighting and protesting comes from that history, perhaps, but it's hard to protest against left unions. That's the reason for tea estate workers, widely all India response and every media discussing and BBC reported, but in 1 year, it got dissolved. It's hard. Coming to your question about mostly the comments you said, and one question. That's how I understood. Absence of state in Munnar. When a corporate body occupying a place, managing the entire area, and taking care of the whole tea production, they are the sole body over there. Kerala government did not, that's my criticism, did not. Had there been a school, high school over there, the fate of the young people there now would have been very different. So we also looked at the share of their total income goes for sending children for education outside was huge because there is no facility, educational facility. There is no assimilation into the local culture. The local schools are in regional language mediums. So they had to send to Tamil Nadu for education. So that's the absence of state, which you don't find everywhere. This location is very specific. Effeminization, I meant generally in politics, if you look at women entering politics, and we emulate, in order to become successful, women emulate the way men do politics.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere. In many occupations, teaching, for instance, I always think about it. How can you be less assertive? You know, not displaying your authority. So every occupation, if you look at, that's the kind of, that's how women becoming, sustaining in those occupations and becoming successful. But when men entering into a predominantly feminine occupation, what will happen? What happened is something that I try to explain, because they realized, the management realized, men are a disruptive force. They started recruiting men, training them, and then they created a union, protested for high wages, and seen them as a very disruptive force. And the recruitment came down significantly. And in many places, they were told to be like women. So sometimes, maybe they're nurses, they ask women to clean the floor, for instance. There is no one understaffed, you can clean the floor. You can't ask that to men, they don't do it. So that's why I used effeminization, which you don't find in every other sector. This is very interesting case hence. Then you said capitalism, that's the question you asked. Capitalism is, and the exploitation, and it's beyond, this is how I understood, correct me if I'm wrong, it's beyond the social categories of gender or whatever, ethnicity or whatever. I do not agree with that, because that's feminist economists have been arguing, writing about. For instance, feminization of labor. When there was this crisis in the 80s, for instance, formal employment, in order to recover from the crisis, more women into the labor force, flexible employment, so on and so forth, with less wages and entitlement, so on and so forth. So capitalism, whatever convenient, wherever it finds opportunity, it will make use of. So making use of, hence, women's labor and certain kinds of groups, ethnicities, for instance, United States, if you look at, certain undocumented workers, very low paid. So wherever you look at, you find such categories, and hence the argument is women are being systematically exploited. 1984, Lord Beneria and Geethasen's
Yes.
paper was basically, you can look at that paper, very insightful paper. As a student, I read that. Hence, that's the point. When coming to Nancy's question, why certain protests receive support and certain other protests do not. So in order to respond to that question, the recent Asha workers protest is a case. Generally, when these Anganwadi workers, these are poor people send their children to Anganwadis, middle class, upper middle class send their children to private care institutions. Anganwadis are the government institutions. So their protest, middle class is not very interested in. They protested recently. No one talked about it. But this particular category, I wrote about it in Economic and Political Weekly in India, and I got positive as well as negative responses. People were angry also. I got emails. Because pandemic, these Asha workers were constantly in touch with the middle class. And then pandemic is a moment of uncertainty and anxiety. They provided support, emotional support, and their status in the society, Asha worker status is improved. Middle class took them very seriously. And when they protested, a lot of popular support and media, and that's not the case with sanitation workers. So that was the point I was making. Garnering, but then the point basically, garnering middle classes support, in a sense, visibility you get, but your politics is wrong over there. So many people disagreed with me. Well, that's okay. Rejoinders came and all that. Any more? Your questions.
It seems that we are running short of time, unfortunately. And then, I mean, your talk is so rich in ideas and content that enticed me to have so many questions, but I don't think we have time for all of them. And perhaps not even for the question I had for Alicia. So I restrict myself to perhaps one specific statement on the one hand, and then another, on the other hand, a question, a particular question. Well, my statement is that you present three cases of protests, and it strikes me that, in a way, that the three cases share many commonalities, regardless whether one of them happened in the primary agricultural sector and the other two in the service sector. So they seem to share the same kind of, labor conditions, workers. But in the first case, and this I come to my question, have there been attempts at agrarian reforms in India? I mean, because agrarian reform is a very important step for economic development. And for instance, in the case of Latin America, just a few countries have achieved agrarian reform, and that makes a huge difference. For instance, in the case of Brazil, there has been no agrarian reform, I mean, seriously speaking, because they have been, sort of fake agrarian reforms. And most of the problems that Brazil faces as a country in terms of economic development has a lot to do with the fact that they lack a serious agrarian reform. And the same is true of many other countries. And then, so I wonder whether there has been attempts or a serious agrarian reform in the case of India. If it's so, what happens in the way? I mean, did it fail, or what's the situation in that regard? And continuing with my remark, the nurses' situation in India, well, it's not different here in Mexico, I must say. I mean, it's more or less the same everywhere, but in some countries. For instance, if you look at the case of the nurses' labor conditions in Sweden or in Austria and some other, not all, but some other European countries in particular, the western part of Europe, the situation is quite different. And it has a lot to do with institutional settings, that took care of the risks of the kind of work that nurses conduct. And then I think the problem is the lack of institutional reforms to seriously tackle with the problems that plague the health care system in developing countries. Because what you talked about in India is you can see the same situation everywhere. Interestingly, there is one particular not developed country that doesn't face the same situation, Cuba. Cuba is quite different in terms of the health sector. Even though it's a country, very poor country, I mean, it's a country that has been, suffering from the blockade of the United States. So, I mean, I think it has a lot to do not only with, with the healthcare system itself, but the institutional setting that the nurses are working in, because you don't see that happening in, for instance, in Europe, not even in the United States, where the healthcare system is just also very poor by and large. Okay, that's it. It's up to you. You don't have to.
The agrarian reform in India, if you look at some states had land reform, progressive land reforms. Kerala had, even though there are a lot of criticisms in the sense that it was very limited. And West Bengal, another state, the two states where left politics is very much there. West Bengal also came up with a particular kind of system wherein workers, the owners of the land, they became land owners. So in these two states. But in India as a whole, if you look at, there was no radical land reforms. But in the 60s, if you look at, India was importing food. Yeah, there was this crisis, but India came out of this by green revolution, high-yielding introduction of high-yielding varieties, so on and so forth. So India became, and milk production, a white revolution, so on and so forth. And we also had, as a result, a public distribution system. We get food grains in fair price shops. So that distribution also they took care of. But on the other hand, if you look at who benefited actually from this kind of green revolution, the bigger land owning classes in India, the sugar or any other commodity, if you look at. Recently, there was this farmers, government of India came up with certain regulations, farmers bill, and then farmers from several states, Haryana, Punjab, etc., protested to the extent that the government had to finally, the Indian government had to finally withdraw it. Which significantly was curtailing their rights and their well-being. So the protest took place. So that's in a nutshell. The nurses' question, you said yes, of course, it's about the specific history and institutional alignments. But also the question of state intervention, regulation. It's very hard wherever the state cannot regulate the way it should, the private healthcare system. Pandemic, that's why I said pandemic was a moment. State, the court had to intervene and came up with guidelines and the prices for essential services, testing, etc. So I honestly thought probably after pandemic, things will change to some extent, which hasn't. It has gone back to the earlier, unfortunately, that's what.
And worse, sometimes
Worse, yeah, exactly. So thank you for your comments. We can have more discussion with your other points later.
All right. So I think the seminar comes to an end in this particular moment. So I would ask you to join me thanking Binitha, Professor Binitha, and Professor Alicia for these very enlightening presentations. So thank you very much. Okay.